you, Lisa, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lori Bumbaco. I'm an oncology dietitian, and I'm presenting to you live from Cancer Wellness Center, where I work to offer programs like this one called Ask the Dietitian, and also other programs. Check our calendar on our website, follow us on social so you can see all the great happenings that occur here. I also meet with individuals one-on-one at the center. So if you're curious to learn more about any of that, please just reach out to us or drop us a comment in the chat, or if you're attending on the Zoom or on Facebook. Like, we want some participation here. But I'm really excited for this month's Ask the Dietitian. It's all about herbs and spices. It's our last Ask the Dietitian for the year. Can't believe it's happening. But here we are. And so I'm going to do as I always do for Ask the Dietitian. I'm going to just share my screen and share with you a PowerPoint. When you register for programs, and especially mine, you will have access to all of the content that I create. I share it with you. So for those of you who registered for Ask the Dietitian today, you will get the PowerPoint that I'm about to share. So that might be a little incentive in the future for those of you interested. Really good to see everyone. Hopefully you're staying warm and safe and healthy this holiday season. I am going to share my screen, and Lisa will troubleshoot if there's any issues, as always, any technical issues. Again, it's great to see everyone. Thank you for being here. And we're going to get going on Ask the Dietitian, all about herbs and spices. So on the agenda, I'm just going to list those questions, get right to it, and then provide the answers that I do my homework on ahead of time. And a lot of times, just like today's topic or this month's topic, sometimes I'm challenged, or sometimes I find I need to ask the question asker more questions, because that's what I do best, especially when I'm working with individuals one-on-one in a consult. So that's what's going to happen today as well. And we'll have to just wait and see. And then I'm going to share some resources along the way, and especially towards the end of the presentation. And then, so if you're looking to kind of expand on the content that I shared today, you'll have the opportunity to do that with some trustworthy resources that I have found. Okay. So let's get to those questions. So the first, this seems like a good place to start. How do I use spices and herbs in the healthy way? Great place to start. Okay, so herbs and spices are the aromatic, fresh, dried, and processed leaves and flowers of herbaceous plants. You probably all know that. So herbs are classified as the fresh part of the plant, the flowers, the stems, and the leaves, whereas spices are the dried aromatic portion of the plant. So typically the stalk, the root, the seeds, and the fruit. So like, think about how broad these categories are. There's so many different herbs and spices to choose from that you're bound to find a collection that work for you in the kitchen. And this is why a grocery store might sell fresh bundles of cilantro. So that's the leaves and the stalk, right? And some of you may like cilantro, some of you may not, and that's okay. More for me. And then there's jars of coriander and coriander seeds, or ground coriander you might have seen. Those are the seeds of the very same plant, which is really kind of interesting for those of you who did not know that. Spices and herbs have a vast array, all these different smells and tastes and flavors. Herbs tend to have a higher or more concentrated dose of health promoting benefits, according to research. Just FYI. So the health benefits of herbs and spices are really attributed to their active chemicals. And this could be another Ask the Dietitian topic. I'm pretty sure chemicals are not always a bad thing. Typically, if they are, it's in the dose or the type of the chemical. But really, the foods that we eat and the compounds that are present in them are technically chemicals. So the chemicals specifically are, they function like antioxidants. They also function like anti-inflammatory agents, as well as antibacterial agents. And the research that we have suggests that herbs and spices in a diet may help lend the health properties to an overall healthy diet and reduce the risk for chronic diseases like diabetes, some of our respiratory diseases, obesity, cancer, as well as cardiovascular disease. Now, the World Health Organization lists over 21,000 medicinal plants, and they've really been used for centuries, right, as medicine. And so, according to my research, about 70 to 80% of the world, this isn't really happening here in our country, right? But the world really relies on plants as herbal medicine as part of their healthcare. Now, I want to talk a little bit about culinary dose. So that refers to the amount of herbs or spices that are typically used in food preparation when considering what we're eating, and then when we research what we eat, how that impacts our risk for disease. So culinary dose, what does that even mean, right? So what we do know from the research that looks at culinary dose, which I'm going to define in just a moment, when we include herbs and spices in a meal, it can improve our postprandial, meaning after eating, metabolic responses. So as that turns out, that seems to have an impact on inflammation as well as our blood sugar levels, and how that all relates to our risk for cardiovascular disease, our blood sugar control, as well as oxidative stress. So really kind of fun stuff here. We can tap into herbs and spices to improve our health. In research, the amount of spices in a diet and associated with health risks are defined as such, and this is in daily amounts. So a low dose is a pinch up to a quarter of a teaspoon. So a pinch is less than a quarter of a teaspoon. But imagine getting out your measuring spoons now. So a low dose would be a quarter of a teaspoon in the whole day of an herb or a spice. A medium dose is a half a teaspoon up to 1 teaspoon. And then a high dose is more than 1 teaspoon. And this is very commonly done in nutrition research. What they do is they typically compare groups. So they might compare 3 groups, the people that do a low dose, the people that do a medium dose, the people that do a high dose. And then when they understand that that's how much they're having in terms of herbs and spices in their diet, and they might track them over the years, and they see what their risk for diseases are. And then they can sort of do their statistical analyses and figure out how much might have mattered for somebody. And then they compare those groups. Okay, so just a little background, very basic background in research design for nutrition. So let's answer that question, right? How do we incorporate herbs and spices in a healthy diet? First and foremost, this is where working with a dietitian is helpful. I love the idea of just inserting something like a healthy food into what you're currently doing, because then that's not like a major drastic overall haul of your diet, right? It's not a big ask. And we can just take what it is and enhance it. And it's this idea of addition, right? And adding to what you're having and adding healthful properties to what you're already currently having. So let's say you have oatmeal or a smoothie for breakfast. Could you add some cinnamon to that? You know, maybe you make your own banana bread and you enjoy that for breakfast, or a muffin, like a morning glory muffin that's got some carrots in it. And could you make sure that there is cinnamon if there isn't already in the recipe? Could you add that to that? For lunch, could you add some herbs or even dried herbs like oregano and basil? Add them to what you're having. Maybe you have a leftover pasta, or maybe you make a salad or have a side salad, or maybe you have a soup because the weather begs for soup, right? Could you add a little touch of that? And this is quite a bit, 1 to 2 tablespoons. You'd be in the high culinary dose, right? Right off the bat. And then dinner is these are just some examples, maybe a teaspoon of ground garlic or rosemary or thyme to your roasted vegetables. Or if you do like a sheet pan and you have vegetables and meat, could you make sure that you incorporate different herbs and spices into the mix for that? Now, most of us also snack. So there's opportunities to be found there too. And could we mix a half or up to a teaspoon of turmeric and black pepper into things like hummus and yogurt dips? I find I try to do that with my hummus. Hummus is a great vehicle. First of all, it usually means we're going to dip vegetables into it, but it is sort of a blank slate. And if we want to incorporate a different flavorful spice or an herb into the hummus, it could be a way to sort of carry that into your diet. Okay, hopefully those give some inspiration for you. All right, next set of questions I thought were pretty similar, so I just included them together in my answer. Are there anti-inflammatory ones to choose in addition to cumin? I love when my audience is savvy. Either you've been listening and paying attention, or you've learned from someone else, so I give you a lot of credit. And then the next question, are there specific herbs and spices that can reduce inflammation in the gut? Great questions. Okay, so basically all of them on some level have anti-inflammatory compounds. So good to know. Now, some stand out more than others, and right at the top of that list is turmeric. And you might have heard of this. It's one of the most potent anti-inflammatory compounds in our diet. Um, that we could possibly eat, which is really kind of incredible. Black pepper is also like good old black pepper. Who knew? It's anti-inflammatory. And then we have cardamom, a great seasonal spice, rosemary, sage, basil, ginger, clove, and cinnamon. Those are just some of the lists. Some of them are a little more common than others. I think as you're thinking about how you might improve your overall herb and spice consumption, think about the things that I list. And if you're like, oh, wow, I never use cardamom, maybe I can find a recipe or a way to incorporate it in a way that will work for me. Because I think variety really serves us long term because it makes the things that we eat fun and it makes it exciting to be in the kitchen and to discover something new for ourselves. And I really love being part of that journey when I partner with the people that I work with. Now, I would be remiss if well, let me back up. Actually, I'm going to come to this point in a moment. But to answer the question about reducing inflammation in the gut, I would say, and this is just sort of my own judgment on this one, I think if you're going to eat an anti-inflammatory pattern overall, you're going to reduce the gut inflammation that you may or may not have. Okay, so it happens systemically throughout the body, but also locally in the gut. So if we just look towards an anti-inflammatory pattern, it will benefit you. So how do we do that? Now, specifically in the gut, I always like to incorporate more fiber, especially in fruits and vegetables, but also whole grains, beans, and lentils will help do that, including some omega-3 fats. And there's several foods that we can get omega-3 fats from, certainly ground flax seeds and walnuts, but also some of our fatty fish like salmon and sardines and mackerel and herring. And then also enjoying some fermented dairy, as well as some prebiotics like garlic, onion, and Jerusalem artichokes or sunchokes as they're called. If we incorporate these foods on a regular basis, that's definitely supportive to the gut and giving the gut what it needs to help regulate inflammation or modulate inflammation, which happens at the level of the gut barrier. So these might be helpful. But because we're talking about herbs and spices, we want to think about that. So could we incorporate more of them regularly on a daily basis when we're cooking? Now, I promised I was going to come back to this. So thinking about, those herbs and spices as being anti-inflammatory, there's also a whole lot of other things that we can eat or maybe even not eat if we're looking to really optimize how anti-inflammatory our diet is. So to accomplish the biggest bang for our anti-inflammatory buck, consider all of the food choices that you're making, not just your herbs and spices, right? So collectively, the food that we eat and also the food that we eat less of, I don't want to say never, but less of, can help tip the inflammatory potential of the diet that we're eating in our body. So a good example is like a balance scale. So when you think about eating those high fiber plant foods more often, that's going to be anti-inflammatory. And herbs and spices are plants, right? So they belong in that bucket. Whereas eating some of those highly processed foods that are higher in saturated fat, higher in added sugars, higher in salt, those if we eat less of those foods because they tend to be pro-inflammatory. If we eat less of them, or maybe limit really as much as possible, then we're really going to be eating overall in an anti-inflammatory way. Now, I did an Ask the Dietitian on an anti-inflammatory diet. I think it was about a year ago, and it was, as you can imagine, a very popular topic. So we had two Ask the Dietitians for that month. I included a link, so for those of you who have registered and are interested, you can just literally click on this link when we send you these slides. It'll bring you over to the YouTube channel, so you can check that Ask the Dietitian segment out. If you haven't registered for the program and you happen to be watching on Facebook Live, just check out Cancer Wellness Center's YouTube channel. It's all right there for you. All right. And it's free. and it's amazing information. So I watch the videos regularly. It's a really great place to learn more. Okay, next question. What is the healthiest spice? Well, here's where the dietitian gets to ask a question. So I would say healthy for what? What are you looking to accomplish? And this is why a consult with a dietitian is best, right? Dr. Google or AI may think that they know you, but they don't, not like a dietitian could. And so um, it's hard to really answer this question, right? Because there are so many potential benefits to so many different spices, as well as herbs. But this is just a quick snapshot, just so that you can see for yourself of some of our spices and some of the more common ones that we use, what they contain, and that's the phytochemical. That's where those compounds are present in the naturally occurring plant, right, or the spice. And they have found in preclinical data these potential really potent health benefits. So antimicrobial, really great for us this time of year probably, but especially important for our individuals on active treatment. They have antioxidant components, anti-inflammatory properties. Some of these spices can promote digestion. Some of them can help relieve some pain. I mean, it's like, what do they not do? But I would say, as like the perfect expression is variety is the spice of life, right? So we want to think maybe we don't want to focus necessarily on an individual herb or spice and think about how we can maximize really the totality of all of the foods, including herbs and spices, in what we're eating by thinking variety, right? So if we focus on just one thing at a time, that may be necessary, but I think bigger picture, and I think of all of these ways that you can enjoy, especially the ones that are listed on the slide, because the research supports that they're all going to benefit you on some level. And so you can really accumulate the benefit, the more variety that you have in your diet. Okay, hopefully that can be helpful. All right, next question. How do we use herbal teas for GI issues such as abdominal bloating and nausea related to treatment? So I wanted to just share a little bit more about herbal teas because there's a lot on the market that you can choose from. Peppermint tea comes to mind right off the bat. There are compounds in it that sort of calm down the digestive tract, and this can help relieve gas and bloating. Some people that have GERD or reflux, they may not tolerate peppermint when it's strong. So I would just say use good judgment for that and just maybe try a weaker amount of tea, steep it for a less amount of time and see if that's going to help you if you're already dealing with reflux. Ginger, for sure, we know has helped to stimulate saliva and bile in order to aid digestion. And so it definitely has been shown to help us manage our nausea. And specifically, it's like in my textbook, we know that the dose of 0.5 to 1 gram of ginger and ginger extract daily seems to be helpful in managing nausea. Now, some of our commercial teas on the market will literally list that amount. I've seen them. And there also are some ginger, I'm going to say quote unquote, candies that are lower in sugar, but really strong ginger component and ginger extract that will also list that amount. So if you're actively dealing with nausea, you want to look for this dose. Otherwise, a smaller dose may not really give you the remedy that you're looking for. Fennel tea reduces gas and cramping by acting as an antispasmodic. So that might be helpful. Dandelion tea is a natural diuretic and it helps rid excess fluid if that's what you feel like maybe is going on in the gut. And that could help with reducing that feeling of bloating. Chamomile tea has a carminative effect, which helps break up gas in the digestive tract as well. Did you know that? So sometimes people that I work with, they find like they may accumulate some of these GI symptoms later in the day. And so I think chamomile tea is a really great option because we know it also has a calming effect as well. So if you're sort of dealing with bloating later in the day, and you're trying everything you can to help with that, the chamomile tea might be a nice option and a nice ritual, especially as you help unwind and prepare for rest. You may need to steep these teas for up to 10 minutes in order to allow for like a full infusion and really maximize the beneficial compounds that are in them. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up that there are a whole set of guidelines from our National Comprehensive Cancer Network, which address nausea and vomiting. If you ask this question and you want to learn more, when you get the slides, you can click on this link and it will bring you to a patient education about the entirety of what you need to know for managing nausea and vomiting, because there's a lot of options. And if you're still struggling, I don't think that that's acceptable. So you can either look at this for yourself or question your healthcare team. Is there more that could be done if you're still dealing with nausea? Should not be vomiting. All right, nausea is separate from vomiting. Vomiting is an acute need, and I would absolutely reach out to your healthcare provider if that's happening. Besides that, when I work in clinic, especially at Kellogg in Highland Park, sometimes on the front lines when people are dealing with nausea, we talk about this approach in terms of helping to manage their nausea during active treatment. First and foremost, small, frequent meals, but choosing foods that are more bland and starchy. Starches tend to be best tolerated in the GI tract. Taking liquids between meals, limiting exposure to cooking odors, because I find odor tends to be a trigger for nausea for many people I work with. So they may need to choose cool or even cold foods because they don't have an odor, right? Resting and staying and using gravity in your favor. So staying elevated for at least 30 minutes before you lie down. And also noting that walking can help with bloating. So after a small meal, certainly if you're looking to kind of promote digestion, we know that movement, and it doesn't have to be like an active jog around the block. It just needs to be a little light walking, and that can really help relieve bloating and help with digestion. But also to kind of going back to those anti-nausea medications, knowing how to time them in the right way and eating around the dose that you take so that you can make sure you're feeling as least nauseous as possible so that you can eat a little something. Okay. Next question. There is so much information out there. Some of them contradict. I just want to know what the best herb and spices are. How do I know I'm not buying plastic? Welcome to my world and what I do. There is so much information out there, and I think a lot of it may not pertain to you. As you pointed out, it's contradictory. You may hear one thing and then completely the opposite thing from someone else. And so I help people navigate all of this and help it make sense on a personal level, because it's otherwise very confusing and it can be daunting, all the information that's out there. So because plastics were brought up, let's talk about them for a little bit. So microplastics. Have you heard about microplastics? They're finding their way into our food. They have been in our food supply for quite some time, in our water supply. And they're in containers used in food packaging as well. So we're probably having a lot of exposures to microplastics, and there's probably a good amount that exist in our body. Once we start looking for sources of exposure, it can be very alarming and it can seem overwhelming. So if this could be another Ask the Dietitian topic as well. If you're worried about this, I would reach out to me personally, because we can sort through what might be some of the best choices and help remind you what you're doing is the best you can do. And also, could you focus on other important things to help improve your wellness and reduce your risk of any health-related concerns, okay? Because sometimes when we get so focused on something like microplastics, it's so alarming. We're really just not sure what to do when we know from the evidence there's a lot of great ways that you can help yourself, okay? Now, what I would say as it relates to minimizing exposure to microplastics, I would think about the low-hanging fruit. So if you can rinse any food, like not all foods can be, and herbs and spices are sort of, especially spices, they can't really be rinsed, but the ones that you can, try to rinse, because as it turns out, research has shown that when we rinse food, it's going to reduce microplastics up to 40%. So it's worth it, right? If you can do that, especially in things like rice. So if you're having rice regularly, if you have it once in a while, once or twice a month, I would not worry about it. But if it's something you have a few times a week, I would absolutely rinse your rice. Okay. And it's going to reduce those microplastics right off the bat. Ultra processed food tends to be higher in microplastics. And we don't know if that's the reason why ultra processed foods are associated with poor health outcomes. We're not really sure. But what happens when ultra processed food is manufactured, there's a lot of different touch points where these plastics are introduced into the food, right? And they're certainly probably packaged in some plastics, right? And then we also have other food that might not be ultra processed that is packaged, like water, in plastic. Okay. So we want to maybe revisit some of those choices. Let me just back up and think about, could we minimize exposure that way by just reducing our consumption of those foods? Okay. A great example is bottled water. And could you maybe just either use your filter at home and get yourself a water bottle, or just find ways to reduce how much of those plastic water bottles you're having? Um, then another great step is to look at some of the plastics in your kitchen, right? So I would, it's a good time of year, right? Or the spring is another good time of year too, if you're too busy right now. But look at some of your kitchen utensils, and if there are ones with obvious signs of damage, like I know in college, I think I melted a couple things and we still kept them around. But if you have utensils, especially like cooking utensils, that have been cut or they're flaking off, like maybe you have food storage containers where you see like the plastic is starting to wear, it's time to toss them, right? Because that's where the microplastics really seep out into the food that you're cooking or you're putting them in. Especially because when you heat up, especially the heat is going to activate, sort of unlock the ability of the microplastics to seep into the food. And that's probably more problematic. So it's a good opportunity to revisit some of those things. Okay. Now, so what spices do you use? Well, I would look for certified organic spices because, and these are just a list of a couple of them. So Pinch Spice Market, Journey Spice Company, Nice, I think I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not familiar with Nice spices, and Evermill. They first and foremost, they don't use plastic packaging in their products, so that might be a great start. Now, McCormick, Simply Organic, and Great Value brands actually perform independent testing for purity. McCormick, I didn't include in the resources, but they have a pretty nice website if you're looking to learn more, like soup to nuts about spices, like what they are, how to use them, and a little bit more about their pledge to help us really source products that are pure. Okay. Um, Now, I always love to think about other options that you might not be thinking about. So, why not source spices at a local spice shop, right? So, I just listed the Spice House in Evanston and Love That Spice in Highland Park. Shout out to both of those establishments. They are, if you're someone who is ready to make that investment, because it is going to cost a little more, but really find someone and an establishment that's passionate about spices. Check these locations out. Now, I just listed two. There's probably many more to include, and maybe some of you on right now know of some others. I'd love to hear from you. This could be a great opportunity for you to source a high quality product and to learn more. You know, the purveyors are typically someone who is very passionate about what they're selling and can teach us so much about that. Not only just like the history of the spice, but also ways to use it in a delicious way in your own kitchen. Now, I almost always make a pledge to myself every year to have a windowsill garden, but we could grow our own, right? And that's another great way to guarantee that you're going to have things that are what it is that you're looking for. And I think this is a great way to also connect better with what you're deciding to eat and what to put into your body. And that's really like I think it's such a peaceful view. When I look at that picture, I kind of wish it was my windowsill. So now I'm going to recommit and promise that I'm going to do this eventually. But I think it's just such a great way to remind yourselves like, oh, these are some plants that have this really great nutritious potential, and they add such great flavor, and they're relatively easy to do, right? Next question. Hard to believe this is a question, right? And what is the answer to this question? Is there any herb or spice that you can overuse to the point that is not good for your health? Um, Great question. And some of you may know of some of of a little bit of my answer. But I also think this is a good example of it's a good opportunity to demonstrate a point in nutrition that really essentially a lot of times you may hear me say like eat more, eat more, eat more plant foods, eat more fruits and veggies, probably because we're not eating a lot of them, right? But technically we could overdo almost anything, right? So we want to make sure we're just having a good amount. And ultimately, again, if you're looking for what that prescription needs to be, that's where working with a dietitian will help you. But I think in minds of like enough is not, it doesn't mean to be these extreme amounts. Okay, extreme amounts seem to be problematic in almost any instance in nutrition. Okay, so there are these two compounds. One's called myristin, of course, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, myristicin and coumarin. So nutmeg contains myristicin. I'm going to try and say that again in large amounts, very large amounts, more than what we would find in any other food source. And what we know is that ingesting even just a small amount of nutmeg, so two teaspoons, that's a small amount, but actually a lot of nutmeg. If you ask me, I never would have that amount. I've never seen that amount in a recipe. Um, this is shown to be problematic because it has been shown to cause hallucinations, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, and irregular heartbeat. Okay, so, but I don't want you to be worried about nutmeg. I'm going to break it down for you in a minute. And then cassia cinnamon does contain coumarin, and ingesting cinnamon as well as nutmeg in regular amounts is not considered harmful, but coumarin in large amounts, so zero point 0.1 milligram per kilo of body weight, and again, a dietitian can help you figure that out. If you weighed 150 pounds, that's about 6.8 grams, which is a lot. Very hard to do unless I can't even imagine you could do it through the diet. You would have to have a supplemental form of this. It may cause some damage to the liver. The USDA, going back to nutmeg, the USDA set a limit to recommend a half a teaspoon per day to be generally safe, but also beneficial for health. Now, if you look at most recipes, and I challenge you to do this the next time you pull nutmeg out of your spice rack, just see how much nutmeg is in the recipe. It's not a lot. Probably a recipe that serves like 8 to 10 is probably half a teaspoon in the total recipe, right? So you're getting that such a small, minuscule amount of nutmeg that you do not have to worry about this. But I just wanted to be technical and give you a technical answer. Okay. So if we really overdo it, and this is where supplementation becomes problematic in food forms, it doesn't seem to be an issue, right? But if you were to take a supplement of cinnamon, I would source it and I would double check with your healthcare provider. Same with nutmeg. I don't even know if that exists, but if it does, if you're taking a supplemental form of that, I would just make sure that I would check with your healthcare provider to make sure that it's safe for you to take. Okay. And I just want to talk about heavy metals for a moment because we do know that they occur naturally because typically metals occur in the environment and in nature. And so they're going to naturally occur in the spices that we eat, and environmental factors are a big influence on that. Now, what we're exposed to typically is very safe. We don't worry about it. And we have framework and policies that ensure that that's not happening, that we're not getting exposed to unsafe amounts. Spices, however, that are purchased overseas tend to have higher levels of lead because they just don't have this governmental oversight like we do here. And the spice industries overseas, and not really the European Union, I'm going to explain that in a moment, but other locations around the world, they just lack that oversight and they just don't have these controls. They don't inspect facilities, and so they may have higher levels of lead because of that. So we may again want to just source where's our spices, where do we get our spices from, right? In the grocery store, and just check that because it'll be on the label. So the European Commission and the FDA, using the Food Safety Modernization Act, regulates the spice industry. And it enables a safe access for us and a reliable supply of spices. They do this through inspections, they set limits, There's penalties if they're finding anything is contaminated. And they're really strict amounts. They want to make sure it's just the spice that they're producing and putting into their product, that there's no pesticide residues or unsafe amounts of pesticide residues. And believe it or not, this is actually happening, not here, but sometimes there's illegal additives that are added to some of these spice products because maybe the manufacturer is looking to save some money and putting something other than the spice in the product. Really scary stuff, right? But I'm not worried about it here, and I'm just sharing that with you. We have some really great policies in place to help protect us. Okay. Next question. And this is another question that the dietitian gets to ask. What mushroom is this one? Does anyone know? I'm going to talk about it in a moment. So benefits of mushroom powder and the kinds and where to purchase. Great question. So mushrooms, if you haven't noticed, mushrooms are all the rage. I think they're going to continue to become popular and trendy in the upcoming year. So there are functional mushrooms like reishi, cordyceps, shiitake, turkey tail, and lion's mane. That was the picture you just saw because it looked like a lion's mane. They've made their appearance in the wellness world for sure, right? It seems like they're everywhere. And the claims are also everywhere, right? Like if you have mushrooms, like you got to take this mushroom powder because it's going to enhance your memory. You're going to get better focus. You'll be in a better mood, and there's adaptogens in it. So we're going to live longer. It's going to improve our stress response. A lot of claims, right, that sound like they might be too good to be true. And that's because they probably are. Most of the research that we have about functional mushrooms, really, they're just preclinical. So we don't really know when this happens in human form if we see the same benefits. So we see based on theory in animal studies and in vitro what's going on here with these mushrooms and the components that are in them. They do seem promising, but we can't really make these sensational claims until we know more from human data, right? So that's where the wellness industry gets it wrong and they mislead us sometimes. So a powder is technically considered a supplement, right? And so therefore contamination and toxicity are almost always a concern. So I would again source, if you were to take a mushroom powder, where's it coming from? Who makes it? Maybe sometimes I go right on and call the company and ask them more questions. I just want to know more about what I'm buying here. Because anytime it's a powder or a supplement, you're now concentrating what's in it. Because if you think about having the compounds that are in the food form, it's much more diluted, right? But still powerful. And I'm going to share that with you in just a moment. And also, too, whenever we isolate things out of a food form and concentrate it and also take it out and put it into a supplement, it might lose all of its potential beneficial properties because the whole food is really the way we're meant to receive those important compounds. It's the food form, right? So a little bit more about mushrooms. So edible mushrooms, when we eat mushrooms and not take a mushroom powder, we do get a guarantee. We get fiber, we get prebiotics, especially as a part of the fiber, triterpenoids, and ergosterol. Really fun, fancy words that you can share over the holidays. The prebiotics, especially what's exciting, are beta-glucan, and this has been shown to help support our immune system because this directly feeds the beneficial gut microbes and has been shown to help control our blood sugar levels. So we can all do better to eat some mushrooms because of this simple reason alone, the beta-glucan. Now, triterpenoids are phytochemicals, and they act like antioxidants, and they have anti-inflammatory properties as well. Ergosterol, if you haven't heard of that, it's a precursor to vitamin D. And we can enhance this by giving their gills, or like the underbelly of the mushroom, a nice suntan. And it will actually manufacture UVB from the UVB rays vitamin D, and it'll last for like a week. So we can put it in the fridge and we get some vitamin D fortified mushrooms, which is really fun. So we can invite more mushrooms, and I would recommend that over a supplement any day because I'm a dietitian. That's my philosophy. So we could do this by simply sauteing, right? Like if we find lion's mane, and lion's mane commercially is a little bit more petite than what I showed you at that picture. That was like the lion's mane in the wild. But the ones that are harvested are much more petite and manageable in the kitchen. And shiitake, you might be also see it's delicious, sauteed with a little olive oil and onion. Thinking of like lion's mane or some other mushrooms as a kind of like a meat replacement because they have that kind of quality as a meat replacement. Or enjoying even the more commonly known button mushrooms or cremini mushrooms, any way that you like them. Each of them benefit us. And it sounds like, we have to do lion's mane because it's so fancy and it's this functional mushroom. But good old button mushrooms have these same compounds that I'm sharing with you. So don't feel forced to like really get exotic with your mushrooms. We can just go with our good old cremini and button mushrooms if we want. So if you're planning to purchase functional mushroom supplements or like a mushroom powder, look for third-party tested supplements, or even if they have a USP or NFS seal on it, I think that's important. You can look for products that contain 100% of the fruit bodies, and I'm going to explain that in a minute, and or that might even identify the amount of beta-glucan that's in it. And some of these products do that for us, so there's ways to find them. So this is the anatomy of the mushroom. The fruit body is everything that grows above the ground. So some products, I'm sure, don't even include just the fruit bodies. They might include the roots of the mushroom. So we're not going to get any benefit from that, right? We want the fruit body. Now, products that are marketed as full spectrum, we don't really know what that even means, right? And that often includes grains because they're used as a growth medium. So this is a good example that a fruit body, sometimes in like a full spectrum product, they're going to kind of just dig up the earth or the growing medium with the mushroom and then put that into the product. And we're not really getting, again, the benefit of the actual mushroom. It's not like a true pure mushroom product then, right? So it will reduce the desired amount of those beneficial compounds that are in the mushroom only, right? Hopefully I'm explaining that okay. And supplements can also interact with food. Always just remember that because some supplements might have something else added to it. Like I can't even think off the top of my head with a mushroom powder, but it could happen. So just always talk to your healthcare provider about supplement use, but also our pharmacists are really helpful allies as well to help us navigate how much of what we might need or not need. Okay. And as a dietitian, I'm always going to recommend food first and supplements second. Okay, now just to share some resources. So the UCLA has a spice library, like literally, so you can look up some interesting information and history about spices. Gernot Katzer's spice pages, again, this like really neat, like really, if you really want to go down a rabbit hole about spices, you might like both of these websites. The American Botanic Council has been around for a long time, and they have a really great website full of content that's updated regularly. And then because I did a lot of talking about mushrooms, the Mushroom Council is also a super helpful website with content that is even also updated. Like they have a holiday recipe section right now, which is really fun. So if you're looking to learn to eat more mushrooms or the nutritional benefits of mushrooms, you might really enjoy this website as well. Okay. This is our last Ask the Dietitian for the year. So we will be back again January 9th. 2026. How is that even possible? 1 o'clock. It's a Friday afternoon. And our topic is going to be saturated fats. And I chose that one on purpose because I think it's going to become a topic of interest in the world of nutrition. So hopefully, if you have questions about that, you can submit them or just attend and learn a little bit more from me that day. So I'll stop my share and just see if anyone had some questions. I know there were some things put in the chat. So I'm just going to pull up the chat real quick.
Hey, Lori, if you want to answer the questions in the chat before I stop the recording, we'll do that, and then I'll stop the recording.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to go right down the line. Someone is asking about addressing supplementation with B12 while undergoing chemo because this person is vegan and accustomed to adding B12 to the diet. And you've gotten mixed messages. So this is where it's very hard to contradict what you've heard. So what I would do to this person, I invite you to reach out to me directly, and hopefully I can help you address that more specifically. Because I don't want to go against what your healthcare team has suggested, um, even though it sounds like you got mixed messages even within the team, which is a shame. So hopefully I can help you kind of settle that and figure out the best answer for you. I think that's a great question. Um, so someone else asked, I was surprised recently when my doctor told me that turmeric was not recommended. Is there a website or other resource to check if an herb is not recommended with cancer drugs? So what I would do, I would also check with your pharmacist. If you have a local pharmacist that you pick your prescriptions up at, or if there's a pharmacist on your care team, that's another way to just cross-reference, because sometimes when you're surprised and you're like, wait, how come I'm hearing this? You can get confirmation of that, even though it comes as a surprise. And maybe more importantly, there may be an explanation, because sometimes pharmacists do that really well. Sort of like dietitians, like we can explain the why. Like, why are we suggesting you not do this? And that might be helpful too, to help kind of settle the story on that one. I can send, I'm making a mental note, I can send some information about other websites and resources to you so you can learn more about that for yourself, about contraindications. Okay. I'm scrolling down. Some people left options for spices and teas along with pantry staples in Westmont on Cass Ave. There's a bulk store. Thank you for sharing that. Um, so I think what I would do again, like if you can possibly, most food and spices included will include the country of origin, because that was a new law put into effect not too long ago. And so it'll list the label of the country of origin so you can see for yourself. So we're looking for things, I would say, like, I think best options are within this country because we have such great oversight. It's a little bit more of a guarantee compared to something that's purchased overseas. Hopefully that's an acceptable answer. But I appreciate all of those great questions, and I went through all of them, Lisa, so thank you.